King Charles I, standing tall but visibly ashen, stood at the lectern at the Royal Agricultural College. He had arrived to speak on climate change, soil conservation, and other issues he has championed for decades. The cameras were rolling. The audience was silent. The live broadcast had just surpassed 3 minutes. And then it happened. His right hand began to tremble as he spoke about the delicate balance between nature and humanity. His jaw went slack, his eyes narrowed. Before anyone could react, King Charles collapsed. There were screams, the sound of running feet. The feed froze. World staff tried to cut the feed, but it was too late. This stark moment was captured by thousands of viewers on their phones, televisions, and news platforms. It seemed as if the image of the monarchy had been shaken. This was no stumble or discreet retreat. It was a royal downfall, unscripted, uncontrolled, and completely public. Within minutes, palace officials were running around. Security cordoned off the area. Paramedics were on the scene. Prince William, who was attending another event in Bookshire, promptly left the venue. Camilla's motorcade was rerouted. Kate Middleton was unreachable for nearly half an hour, something royal correspondents immediately dismissed as unusual. A crowd began to gather outside the palace gates. By the time the BBC interrupted its programming to report on the incident, the world was already asking the question the royal institution had avoided for decades. What if the king doesn't recover? For years Charles had been a symbol of continuity, the heir to the throne that had been waited on longer than anyone in modern history. He ascended to the throne in a monarchy already weakened by scandal, loss, and generational change. Many expected his reign to be short, symbolic, or uneventful. No one imagined it would begin with such a sudden downfall. Now, rumors are circulating of stress, pre-existing conditions, and a royal apparatus that is already operating internally in contingency mode. Even as it appears externally resilient, even the press cannot deny what it saw. The monarch has fallen, and for the first time since Elizabeth Roman II's death, the British people have been confronted with a terrifying reality. The crown still shines, but its weight is breaking the man who wears it. Those who were present are still reeling from the sound. It was not the thump of a body hitting the floor, nor a collective sigh, but the king's voice fading away. According to an eyewitness sitting in the third row, Charles spoke more quietly and slowly than usual. His posture was steady, but his face was flushed. Some thought it was excitement, others attributed it to the heat. But then the sentence trailed off as if the king had stopped in mid-breath. He did not finish the word. The guest noted. It was as if someone had pressed the pause button. He felt his hand tremble, a blink that lasted too long, and then the collapse. It was not a controlled fall. It was sudden and unprotected. He simply collapsed, a senior palace aide said on condition of anonymity. There was no warning. 1 second he was speaking, the next he was on the floor. It was 3:14 p.m. local time. Security was the first to respond, then the attendants. The event's medical team rushed from the back of the hall, dodging chairs and dignitaries frozen in shock. In a matter of seconds, the room went from ceremonial silence to total chaos. One member of staff tried to lift the king. Another felt his wrist, checking for a pulse. Despite orders to turn off the cameras, it was too late. We were told to turn off the feed. A royal communications employee admitted, but the feed continued for at least 20 seconds after the fall. People saw the incident, and not just those present. Thousands across the UK watched on their phones. Royal fans, political pundits, students doing schoolwork. They all witnessed the king's fall. After the signal went out, speculation began. Was it a stroke, a heart attack, or had he simply fainted? No one had an answer, but the tension was thick with fear and denial. One guest recalled the moment when everyone froze, as if by not recognizing it, nothing had happened. But it did. The panic backstage was immediate. paramedics from the nearest hospital arrived within 8 minutes. According to initial reports, Charles was put on a stretcher, but only after partially regaining consciousness did he mumble something. An eyewitness said, "I didn't know where I was. He mentioned something about the Queen." However, the sentence no one wanted to hear had already been uttered by 2 palace employees just a few steps away. "We need to activate the Menai Bridge." That's the code name for the official protocol in the event of the king's death. And just saying it, even in theory, sent a shiver down the spine of everyone who heard it. "I've never seen so many phones ringing at once," a palace press officer said. Everyone was trying to get ahead of events, but the truth was clear. They were already way behind. The king had collapsed in public in full view of everyone, and it was impossible to hide it. Charles was taken away by ambulance at 3:30 p.m., escorted by unmarked police vehicles. The location of the hospital was not immediately disclosed for security reasons, which only fueled the rumors further. At 3:52 p.m., the palace released a statement. His Majesty the King suffered a temporary episode of ill health during his event today. He has been taken to hospital as a precaution in his conscience and in communication with medical staff, who will provide more information in due course. And inside the palace there was no calm, because no matter how hard they tried to control the narrative, the images were already in the public's hands. The monarchy's carefully cultivated illusion of control, continuity, and imperturbability had been shattered in a matter of minutes with a silent fall, a stretcher, and a team of doctors of frantic aides running. As King Charles's body was wheeled out the back door of the Royal Agricultural College, the palace phones began to ring off the hook. The corridors of Buckingham Palace were in chaos. Nothing like this had happened since the death of Queen Elizabeth, and this time it wasn't a carefully planned mourning. It was a real-time medical emergency witnessed by the whole world. "This must not happen," a member of staff muttered. Not in front of the cameras, not in front of the entire world. 15 minutes after he collapsed, the palace doors were closed. The royal flag continued to fly, a reminder that the king was still alive, but inside the atmosphere was thick with fear. Aides began checking schedules, canceling appointments. International calls were made. The royal chief of protocol reportedly shouted at an aide when he couldn't find the latest updated version of the crisis guidance. And amid the chaos, 2 questions rang louder than others. Where is Queen Camilla, and what are we going to tell William? Camilla had been scheduled to have a private luncheon affair with the select members of the Commonwealth Women's League. However, according to sources close to the matter, she never arrived. Upon receiving the news, she asked her driver to head straight to Clarence's house, where she could be briefed in private. But by the time she arrived, Charles was already on his way to the hospital. That's when everything began to unravel. She was pacing. A source close to her inner circle said her hands were shaking. She was absolutely devastated. Another aide added, she shouted at a staffer who mentioned the live feed, "Don't you dare tell me this is already spreading," she exclaimed, but it was. Meanwhile, Prince William was whisked away from the economic summit at Berkshire. Security evacuated the building. His car was seen leaving minutes later, but not towards the hospital, but directly towards Buckingham Palace. This was telling, insiders said. He didn't go to visit his father, a royal correspondent wrote on social media. He has come to take up his role, whatever that may be, in the coming hours. At 4:15 p.m., senior members of the royal family gathered for emergency meetings. Sources say a secure video call was set up within an hour with Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and senior aides. Princess Anne is rumored to have been furious at not having been given advanced warning about the king's health, suggesting the palace had been downplaying his symptoms for weeks. Catherine, Princess of Wales, was unreachable for almost 30 minutes at Windsor Castle. When she finally answered, she immediately cancelled her appointment and was seen leaving in a black car without commenting. She was not panicking. A source said she was preparing. However, it was Queen Camilla's behavior that attracted the most attention Inside the palace, she was heartbroken, a servant who wished to remain anonymous revealed. These were not feigned tears, but genuine grief. At one point she was heard asking a member of staff, "What if he doesn't recover from this? What happens then?" That's when the rustling that had started at the scene of the incident was heard again. Man at bridge, not yet. Time to activate it, not yet. But protocol, planning, and emergency documents had to be dusted off just in case, because, as one courtier said bluntly, the king has fallen and that changes everything. At 5:00 p.m. London was unusually quiet. Shops remained open, but the airwaves were muted. In bars and homes, screens alternated between muted sports broadcasts and somber BBC special reports. No one raised their voices. Everyone waited. Across the country, the headlines were the same. King Charles collapses during speech, condition unknown. In Windsor, in Balmoral, and outside the gates of Buckingham Palace, small groups of people had already gathered. They were not tourists or royal aficionados. They were ordinary Britons, some carrying flowers, others with Union Jacks folded under their arms. A woman in her 70s outside Kensington Palace told a Sky News reporter, "I was there when Diana died. This feels similar. It's different, but the atmosphere is the same." An online total chaos, quote. Twitter, now X, exploded within seconds of the broadcast being interrupted. The hashtags #1 Charles, #1 Buckingham, #1 the king is dead, #1 Camilla, #1 William is next, and #1 Queen Catherine were trending. Everyone was searching for answers. A shaky, low-quality but unmistakable clip showed the king bending over before collapsing. Before an hour was up, it had more than 20 million views. The Crown's PR teams were trying to file copyright infringement claims in real time, but it was like trying to stop a flood with needles. "It's not just that he collapsed," said a CNN commentator in the US. "It's that we saw it. Monarchs don't collapse in front of cameras. They should never fall, but he did." And the longer the official silence lasted, the darker the speculation became. At 6 p.m., the BBC suspended all regular programming. Radio 4 switched to continuous coverage. Presenters in black suits began to appear on screen. According to an unconfirmed medical leak from the hospital, King Charles lost consciousness twice during emergency transport. Another since-deleted tweet claimed that doctors had been concerned for weeks about a possible cardiac arrhythmia. None of this was verified, but it all spread faster than it could be disproved. In the meantime, world leaders began to react. In French, President Emran wrote, "France stands with the United Kingdom with hope and concern." President Biden stated, "Our thoughts and best wishes are with Her Majesty and the British people." Even the Pope sent a brief message wishing health, peace, and strength to the servant of unity. However, the mood in Britain was not hopeful, but rather subdued. A second statement from the palace, issued at 6:45 p.m., only added to the tension. Her Majesty remains under close observation. The royal family thanks the public for their concern and will provide further information as required. No images, no videos, no medical statements, just words. And for a country that had watched its monarch collapse live on air, words were no longer enough. The official message was straightforward. This was just a blip, nothing serious, no cause for alarm. But the people had seen too much. In just 12 hours, the United Kingdom had been confronted with the truth that the monarchy had tried to hide for centuries. Mortality. The king collapsed. Tensions boiled over. The queen wept. The princess stood firm. And now the entire institution held its breath. Even if King Charles recovers and emerges from hospital with a smile in his hand raised, the image of this fall has already been seared into the collective memory. A sovereign standing still, a throne momentarily without an owner. Internal reports suggest that contingency plans are now being quietly updated. Regency briefings have been reviewed. Crisis teams have been restructured. The term abdication has not been used publicly, but inside palace walls no one dares rule anything out. Because it's not just coronations and jubilees that make history, sometimes history changes with a fall. As one BBC commentator put it just before the broadcast cut to the national anthem, what happens next is not just about health. It's about trust in the crown within the family and what it means to carry on even if the person who wears it falters. And so begins the wait not for death but for transition. However this story ends, the monarchy will never again be able to say this didn't happen in front of the world because it did. And now the question is no longer whether the king will rise. The real question is the crown set to fall for the first time in a generation? The coverage didn't end there. At 7:01 p.m., two black Range Rovers entered Buckingham Palace through the back door, unmarked with tainted windows. But royal watchers recognized it immediately. It was Prince William's vehicle, and he was not smiling, not waving, not looking at the cameras. He entered the palace like a man who had already taken charge. Inside, everything had already changed. According to sources close to the palace, King Charles was still in hospital in a stable condition, but undergoing further tests. He is said to be fully conscious, but aides admit he was confused. He could not remember exactly when he fell. Outside his hospital room, however, the monarchy could afford no confusion. Someone had to take the initiative. That someone was William. At 7:30 p.m. it was confirmed that he had called an emergency meeting, the first of its kind since the death of Queen Elizabeth Roman II. Senior advisers, lawyers, and senior members of the Privy Council were taking part via encrypted channels. The aim to prepare for the succession. No, Charles is not dead, but his collapse hastened everything. William is not just intervening, an official explained. He is stepping up. This is hugely significant because unlike past crises where the palace has acted defensively, this time the future king is acting, not reacting. According to reports, it was not his father he called first. It was Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. The content of that conversation remains confidential, but theories quickly emerge. Some believe they discussed temporary powers. Others say William requested a preliminary report on Operation Many Bridge, the carefully planned protocol in the event of the king's death. Still others claim the conversation turned to a more direct question. How much time is left before a regency is announced? A regency can be triggered under British law if a monarch is deemed unable to fulfill their duties due to illness, mental incapacity, or prolonged absence. This requires a medical assessment and the consent of the Lord Chancellor, as well as at least 3 other senior royals. Williams was preparing for this. No one confirms it, but no one denies it either. A royal historian wrote on social media, "Charles may recover, but today we are seeing William assume a role that he can no longer avoid. There were rumors of personnel changes within the palace." A senior official told colleagues, "We are no longer in support mode. We are preparing a transition and then the visual component." William was in the same room where his father waited for the crown for years. Now the father is in a hospital bed and the son is in the eye of the storm. Not because he craves power, but because he is next. He always has been. But now the future is no longer theoretical. It is knocking at the door, and whoever answers it is ready. While the country focused on the state of the king's health and William's rise to power, something more intimate and deeply emotional was happening behind closed doors. 2 women, 2 titles, 2 completely different reactions. Queen Camilla was reportedly devastated. She burst into tears as she received a second medical report from the hospital confirming that Charles had briefly lost consciousness again during initial tests. This was not supposed to happen. She kept repeating. According to an aide, his hands were shaking. He was refusing to eat. At one point, he asked all members of staff to leave the room. Camilla has been by his side. Charles through scandal, exile, redemption, and coronation. They have fought harder than any other royal couple in recent memory to reach the top, and just as they were beginning their reign, it was threatened not by controversy but by fragility. She was not prepared to be queen alone. A staffer said she has always been queen with him. Meanwhile, in another wing of the palace, Catherine, Princess of Wales, moved like a silent shadow, calm but determined. She did not speak to the press. She did not smile. What happened behind the scenes? She took control of everything. She was in the communications room within minutes. A senior aide revealed. She asked who was in charge of handling information, who had been told no to report if things got worse. Kate, the Duchess who became a princess, the wife who is preparing to be queen, has been training for this moment for years. She did not cry, she did not freeze, she acted. While Camilla broke, Kate formed. And while neither side could do anything of the two had asked for this moment, they now found themselves at a crossroads, one possessed by longing, the other possessed by preparation. Inside the palace, the contrast was stark. Camilla, emotional and rightfully so, and Catherine, an official pause. She seemed like someone who had already resigned herself to what was to come, not to death, but to transition. As the king rested, there was already a sense of certainty in the air. The next queen is already at work, not because she wants the crown before its time, but because someone must hold it tight until it passes from hand to hand.